Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members and guests, those who are here presently at the AWIA WA July event. My name is Brendan Augustine. I'm the president of AWIA WA. Thank you for joining us, those who are online and those who are here present tonight on this rather cold and rainy night. Today, before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we are gathering, the Noongar people of the Noongar people, and their elders past, present, and their ongoing, and I'd like to acknowledge their ongoing presence and leadership in our country and state and our region. This evening we have a slightly different themed event from what we do typically. It is potentially something that Australia needs to be doing more of. It is sports diplomacy with a particular emphasis on Asia. Australia is a sporting nation that trades on its sporting image. But apart from cricket in South Asia, it doesn't really have a lot of resonance in other parts of Asia. One reason is sometimes we play sports that traditionally doesn't have that support base in Asia. In my case, I came across it once when I was working in Indonesia, and where the then Australian MotoGP champion, I think it was Mick Doohan, came to Indonesia. Of course, he was known in Australia as within the motorcycle and the motorsports environment. But we at the embassy were absolutely surprised of how big a star he was and how much he was feted. So much so that we got a call from the president's office for a personal meeting between some in the presidential entourage with this very famous Australian, which if you walked down the street in Sydney, Perth, Melbourne, or Brisbane, would hardly be recognized. And so I think we have an opportunity to explore this issue, and we have two very special speakers here who are sporting people themselves and who have lived and played sport in the region. First, we have Robbie Gaspar, who will be our first speaker. Robbie is as we say in Australia, soccer, but the rest of the world say football professional. He's played, after playing in Australia, he played in Malaysia and in Indonesia for quite some time. He's been very active subsequent to his playing days in promoting relations with Indonesia, and he has a great vantage point on which to explore this issue. And we have also Ciriello, who was an Australian national hockey player, played almost 200 games for Australia, won World Cup gold medals, World Cup championships, and many other accolades. And Chris played hockey in different parts of the world, but for today's discussion, he played 5 or 6 seasons in the Indian Premier Hockey League Championship, and then subsequently took on coaching roles there. The question that we've asked them to kind of address is how, being an Australian, playing in a sport, very popular sport in the areas, in the parts of the world where they played their sport, what was their experience? How did they experience it as an Australian? And I guess I'll let them say it in their words, but following that, we'll have a panel session where we'll have a Q&A first between the three of us, and then open it to the audience as we always do, to delve into the topic. And can I just again apologize for the technical issues we had at the beginning? Can I give the floor to Robbie, and we're really interested to hear your story.
Thank you, Brendan, and Thanks again for the opportunity to AIIAWA to come and have a chat with everyone here and discuss a topic, a subject that I'm really passionate about. So a little bit about my story. Born and bred here in Western Australia. Played professional football for around 14 years, and 10 of those 14 years was in Asia. But my first experience in Asia playing football was when I was 16 years of age. So with the West Australian state team, we travelled to the Lion City Cup, and it sort of really opened my eyes to Asian football. So I went to Singapore. We got to play against the Singapore national team, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and we ended up losing the final to AIK Stockholm. And we played in a tournament where in the final we had around 5,000 people at the old Jalan Besar Stadium, and it sort of really I was just blown away by the passion and the love for football. So when I tried my hardest to make it in Europe, and then I decided I might give Asia a bit of an opportunity. I had the opportunity to go to Brunei in 2002. So I was lucky enough to play for one of the princes over there, Prince Kawi. He was a nephew of the Sultan. So he asked me to come and play and be a guest in one of his teams in the FA Cup in Brunei. So I had 6 fantastic months there, and that stint finished. And the Prince during that time was trying to enter his team into the Singapore S League at that time, and that didn't work out. So I came home, and I was offered an opportunity to go and play in Sabah, which you know very well as well, growing up there, as to go and play in the Malaysian Super League. So I arrived in Malaysia. I had a fantastic first season there. We ended up playing in a Malaysia Cup final, so played in front of 85,000 people. An FA Cup semi-final, we finished 4th, and on a personal, I had a really good season where I scored 13 goals from midfield. So that really whetted my appetite to keep on playing in Asia. So I came back again in 2004, and we had a bit of an indifferent season that time. And then I actually sort of left Sabah at the end of 2004, went back to Brunei again to play another 6 months for the same team with Prince Abdul Kawi. So after that 6 months, I came home, and through the same person who actually arranged for me to go to Malaysia, Peter Butler, who ended up becoming a very close mentor and close friend of mine, he offered me the opportunity to go and play in Indonesia. I didn't know much about Indonesia, even though they were nearest neighbour to the north. And as I always say, Jakarta, their capital, is closer than our capital, Canberra, a city of 20 million people. I'd never been there. I'd never really experienced. I didn't know much about Indonesian football. And I ended up being the first Australian to play professionally in Indonesia. Went and signed for a club called Persita Tangerang. But what really blew me away when I first got there was the love for professional football, how good the standard was. No disrespect to Malaysia and Brunei, but the standard was on another level. The professionalism as well was on another level. And I was just blown away by it. It actually took me a little bit of time to actually adapt to Indonesia, just the level of the game, the intensity, the amount of travel, the big crowds, playing games at 3:30 instead of the usual Malaysian kickoff at 8:15. So the first year I struggled. It was a bit more like an adaptation period. But it really whetted my appetite to stay and continue playing on in Indonesia. That year I had a sort of a bit of an indifferent season, as the whole team did. And then I ended up moving to a team called Persib Balikpapan in East Kalimantan. So I'd heard a lot about Balikpapan through a friend of mine in Kota Kinabalu. He was an Australian, had an Australian restaurant there that I used to sort of travel a fair bit to have, like a bit of Australian cooking, especially during my pre-match meals. And he spoke about Balikpapan a fair bit. So I ended up moving there and living there for 3 years, and I had a fantastic time there. So the team in Balikpapan was a bit of an unfashionable team, but we ended up getting to the top 4 in Indonesia for the first time. And yeah, I sort of had 3 fantastic years there. During my time there, I got to travel all over Indonesia. So I traveled past Aceh, which is in the west, all the way across to Papua in the east. So what people don't realize how large Indonesia is. It's 5,200 kilometers from one end to the other, 7,500 islands. And when you think about Australia, it's only 3,800 kilometers from east to west. It's a massive sort of difference as well. And during my time in Balikpapan, we ended up being really successful. I had 3 fantastic years there. Then after that, my time finished up and I went to Persema Malang. For people that don't know where Malang is, it's in East Java. So it's maybe 2 hours from Surabaya up in the mountains. So I played for a team which was the Walikotas team, which is the mayor's team, so Parpenny. So I had 2 great years there. During that time, we actually did a team transition into the Liga Super as well. So had another great year there as well. Then finally, I sort of finished up and played at Persib Bandung, which is the biggest team in Indonesia. And that experience blew my mind with respect to playing for a team. You'd play against Persib, but actually playing for them, you always felt like you're part of the Beatles. Wherever you're playing, there was full stadiums. So we had 45,000 regularly. You travel, 10, 15,000 fans would travel with you across throughout Java. So that was a fantastic experience. And during that time there as well, I ended up sort of becoming a member of the Players Association, the board. So I was the first Australian to ever sit on a foreign player union board, which I sort of, which I was really proud of. And so a lot of the players used to look up to me to go and help them if they had any sort of issues and stuff like that. And sort of my time finished at the end of 2012. But during that time there, I became a bit of an Indonesianist, passionate about Indonesia, passionate about building relations through football. So I came home in the 2012, early 2015, excuse me, and I didn't really have much of a skill set apart from playing football. So I went back to university and I studied a Bachelor of Business with a major in accounting and Indonesian. So I learned a lot of Bahasa Gaul. For people that don't know what Bahasa Gaul is, it's sort of the local slang language. So I went back and learned formal Indonesian. And during that time as well, I was employed by the Global Players Association, FIFPro. So my remit was Southeast Asia and also South Asia. So I assisted a lot of the player associations with their strategies, with their moving forward and with their organising as well. So that was fantastic as well. And during that time as well, I was lucky enough to go and do a 4-week internship at the Australian Embassy. So I wrote up the Australian Embassy's sports diplomacy strategy for the year 2016. So which was something I was really sort of enjoyed sort of learning. And I didn't really know much about sports diplomacy up until that time. And just a year earlier, the federal government brought out their sports diplomacy strategy. So for between 2015 to 2018. So that was a great experience for me as well. I came back, finished my degree, went back and studied a grad cert international relations, being passionate about sort of in international relations and sports diplomacy and building those people-to-people links through football. I sort of finished that. And then during that time as well, I was part of the Australia-Indonesia Business Council, ended up becoming chair in 2020 for a year, stepped down when Jenny Matthews came on board, and then only recently sort of become president of the Indonesia Institute. So I'm passionate about Indonesia, passionate about building relations through sport or just building those people-to-people links as with people that have lived in Asia. A lot of it's relationship-based, having that sort of cultural competency, that sort of Asia literacy or Indonesia literacy, and sort of really looking to Indonesia or, other countries, Malaysia, India as well. Chris is going to discuss that as well, because there's so much potential up there for Australia to really sort of build their relationship, that soft diplomacy through sport. And, I'm just really happy to be able to come here and actually discuss sports diplomacy with yourself and everyone else here in the room.
Great. Thank you very much, Robbie. And we'll come back to kind of we'll ask some probing questions later on about the journey and how the perceptions of you being an Australian in all those roles as a player, as a rep in the association, and managing all of that and your subsequent journey. If I can pass on to you, Chris. Similar, if you could give us a bit of a summary as Robbie did in terms of that journey, particularly on your interactions and your period working in India, well, playing and then working in India.
Sure. Thank you very much, Brendan, and AIA for WA for having me here today. Sports diplomacy for me. I'll probably start with a bit of my just quick touch of my background. I played hockey for Australia. I played 199 games. I scored 116 goals. I went to 2 Olympics, won an Olympic medal, World Cup, gold medal, 2 Commonwealth Games, gold medals, an array of Champions trophies, about 6 medals, 5 gold across my time. So I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with one of our very illustrious West Australian leaders, Rick Charlesworth. 6 years, 6 days a week, often too many hours in one day, as we say. A little bit about my background. My mother's actually born in India, so I'm half Indian and half Italian. So as we say, some of the best food in the world. Hard as an athlete to keep the weight down, that's for sure. But in regards to working within India as a historical base, I was brought up in a culture. I'm originally from Melbourne and not really having a full understanding of how I fit in and amongst the Australian community until heading to India for my first time, which was in 2010, the Commonwealth Games. So that experience was quite interesting. The village hadn't been finished yet. By the end of it, it was fantastic. We played in front of a stadium of about 55,000 screaming Indian fans. And India, very similar to Indonesia, they are very passionate. It's like having 100 Indians versus 1,000 Australians. So drums and seats, and we had stuff to bang things against the fence and whistles, and it was definitely the next level experiencing from an Australian perspective. We ended up beating India 8-0 in the final. So I scored one of my favourite goals out of my 116 above a goalkeeper's head. I predominantly played as a defender, but then as I progressed through my career, played midfield and a bit of attacking midfield as well. I played, like Brendan said, I played the Indian Premier League, so very similar to the cricket. Played 5-6 seasons there. As I explained earlier, some of the sessions you'd have in the 6 weeks, 27 flights, of which 0 were on time. Traveled all over India from Ranchi, so different. India's a very interesting country with 30 different states, and they're all at different levels of growth and economy growth as well. So we're able to travel a fair bit through there and see the disparity in the way people live. Everywhere from Mumbai, Ranchi, Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, some different states all across the state. From that experience, IPL is very interesting because you don't get to play the whole time. So there's a set of rules where you can only play 5 players at one time as a foreigner. And we had 10 foreigners and 20 Indians in our squad, which is my role was more about culture, about bringing the players in together. And India, very similar to Indonesia, there's such a different level. So we had a lot of players that had played for India. We had the junior India players, we had club players, we had juniors coming through. Then we had about 14 different languages. We had different religions and different hierarchies within those regions. So part of my role as a player was to bring all that together. We ended up first year finishing about 4th, went on to finish 3rd, 2nd, and then we won the actual title. So that was quite an interesting experience to be able to travel around and sort of develop that. From there, I got offered, I was still playing for Australia, and I got asked to go over and be the assistant or analytical coach for the Indian men's national team. So this team is very passionate, should I say. They're the only team in the world to ever have won 8 gold medals during the Olympics. So I had a very interesting interview, I suppose, offering the job. There was 30 different people, as you do culturally in India, 3 different organizations, and then about another 20 people on the outside. So it was a very interesting PowerPoint experience, which I should have done for you today. However, there was what we call Hockey India, which are the ones that run all the national body. There was Sports Authority of India, so that's a government body. And then we had the ministry. So they're the ones with all the money, which I should say they have a lot of money. So they definitely look after a lot of people. When I look at and took the position, because I had spent so much time in India, they spoke English during our playing time, into Hindi, into Punjabi. And the guy, which was the money man, sat at the front and explained in Hindi, so I understood what he was saying, talking about whether I would take the role for a lesser money because I was younger. And he asked around, and I said, sure, I would. And what he then clicked was I understood Hindi. He then went and asked me if I was negotiable. And I said, of course I'm negotiable if the price is going up. So what we did was, that became quite a huge joke along the time for a long period of time. Once I took the role, we ended up with about 16, 17 different tournaments across the world. I coached in the World Cup, which is in India, as a manager, media manager, and also the assistant coach. So all the marketing and all the meetings had to come through my scheduling, which was a bit of a mission in India. and then went on to coach Asian Games, which is nearly 15,000 athletes that go through Asian Games, which is bigger than the Olympics, Commonwealth Games in the Gold Coast as well. So I was lucky enough to be with these guys. I came on when they were about number 8 in the world. There was then 4 head coaches, so 3 cycled through while I was there. And we got them to number 3 via the Olympics, which they won a bronze medal, which was pretty fantastic. Across my time, we had anywhere from 33 in the squad to 66, sometimes more, of which sometimes we coached 8 hours on the pitch plus meetings, and you lived on campus. So you were literally 150 meters from where they lived. And so you were available 24/7. So it was a bit of a different cultural experience for not so much myself, but the other guys amongst through the team. And like I said, we had a lot of North Indians, Punjabi. We had people from Varanasi. We had people from Kerala. We had such an array of different players that we had to try to make them fit. The common language we used was English, which is quite interesting for a lot of people because people spoke different languages. Like I said, we had more than 11 or 14 languages, religions, hierarchies, and I had to sort of stamp that out to be able to build a good culture within the team. So we had a young guy come in at 18, and his father, as I found out later, was the head of the police, and I had 7 police. So as an 18-year-old, he was telling guys in their 30s what to do. And I said, unfortunately, you take a step up the run the right way. So we had a lot of different cultural experiences we really built upon. Those guys went on to really develop well. Like I said, win a medal at the Olympics, which is fantastic for these guys. I went through a lot of different regions. When I worked with the Indian SI, which is a government body, we did selection for under 14s, 16s, 18s, 21s, men's, women's across the country. So we'd go to regional areas and see the way they lived, see where they come from. We spent a lot of time with the captains and so forth and seeing where they actually had grown from. I spent a bit of time in Jalandhar, which is sort of North Punjab area, and seeing where one of the academies had gone from 11. There was 11 Olympians that come out of the one academy and that were in the team at the one time. So I went through there and sort of saw what they did. And the Indian captain, we went through his first house before he became captain. And it was a rectangle box with 3 holes, no doors. And while we're there, it was 48 degrees. So all I wanted to do was have air conditioning. And he said, no, this is lovely. This is beautiful. So it was a bit of a different challenge and mindset for a lot of people. Interestingly enough, when it came to the last head coach, was an Indian guy that got shifted on. The guy that got rid of me at 199 games, an Australian guy, full recycled, and then ended up taking the position as head coach with me in India, of which was a bit of a cultural shock, but he's still there now and he's doing really well. So that's a big sort of little bit of background, or a lot of background for you guys. I also have just come back from the West Australian trade delegation, which went to India, went to 4 different cities. Me being half Indian and then coaching in India, I have a lot of different relationships, and that was a very interesting, a lot of interesting meetings. And some of the sports diplomacy with, say, JSW, have got over 700,000 employees and are getting back into more, at the moment, individual sports, but looking at team sports, and then Tata Steel roundtables and that type of stuff, as well as our own sort of businesses we've looked at throughout India. It's a very interesting place. Hockey India have really built it since winning a medal at the Olympics. We're looking at, there's 40 new academies that have come on board, all ranging from A to D sort of rating. And then just the support coming from the Indian government into that has been absolutely phenomenal. There's 10 coaches coming here to Perth for the first time ever to have experience coaching outside of India. And it's sort of opened up a huge market, of which West Australia are looking to be able to develop.
Great. I think maybe I can now delve into the kind of the more strategic issues and your interaction with those issues. Maybe Robbie, to you first. So So if I can picture this, you're playing, you're an Australian, and I'll focus on Indonesia, because I think that's that's obviously the closest neighbor, and and a country with which, at the end of the day, compared to say Malaysia and Brunei, where we've got actually much closer cultural ties, language links, historical ties, but with Indonesia. So if you're playing there as an Australian, you said first Australian to play for one of the professional teams there. What was the perception of your teammates, the club administration, the people you came across, the fans, not to you as an individual, because we know you're a good guy and a likable guy, but as an Australian, and what image did they have of Australia, both generally and as a soccer nation, a football nation?
As I tell a lot of people, that we're really well respected throughout the region,
Mm.
especially, throughout Asia and throughout the world through football, that we actually do punch above our weight for the size we are,
On football matters.
Yeah, definitely. 5 World Cups in
Yeah.
a row, like for a country of Australia, I think that's fantastic. Like you look at Italy, hasn't made the last 2 World Cups. So this, but but how do you say it? It's for us to do that over the last 5 World Cups. We've got a lot of cred throughout Asia and throughout the world. Especially from a sports science point of view as well.
Sports science.
Sports science, we're very well respected. We've got someone like Ange Postecoglou doing fantastic things throughout Europe with coaching. Kevin Muscat in Japan. So I went there, and they have a massive respect for Australian footballers over there, and for ourselves. We wear our heart in our sleeve when we're over there when we're playing, and I really sort of enjoyed it. And I think I try to embrace the culture as much as possible, and it's all about sort of respect, being humble. That humility is massive. And I was just blown away by the professionalism, because I've never been there. No other Australian had been there, played professionally. And I was just blown away by their professionalism. They embraced me as well.
Just that point, because, my experience, both growing up in Malaysia and working there in the 90s, where Australia was not qualifying for the World Cups. So you're already Australia doing well in the international stage in football. And I think that subsequently Australia has won an Asian championship as well. We do well, always got to finals a couple of times or won it once. So already you're seeing that having an impact in Indonesia and Asia more generally. The Australian soccer reputation is growing, is helping Australia's image.
Definitely. And we're sort of lucky as well. Was quite fortunate that we've now become part of Asia with respect to,
the federation.
The federation. So in Asia, they've got a foreign player rule. It's called the 3+1 rule. So you have 3 foreigners, and then you have 1+1 Asian, and Australia falls in that Asian category.
Okay.
So it's provided a lot of opportunities for a lot of Australian players to be able to go on playing Asia.
Because you're from the same federation.
Yes, from the same federation. So, but then you look at countries like, from a strategic point of view, Japan and Korea, they've gone 3+1+1. That extra +1 is an ASEAN player rule.
Okay.
So they've seen the potential of ASEAN, and so they've opened up an ASEAN player spot in their countries.
To funnel that talent through. Yeah.
Funnel that talent through, building those relationships, those business-to-business links, those people-to-people links, and they've really taken it to another level. Here in the A-League, we haven't actually got the +1 rule yet. I've been sort of speaking to, I've been always championing that we need that +1 rule to better engage with our nearest neighbors, sort of.
But so the numbers, because the numbers in Indonesia are always big, but the support level, I mean, not just for Indonesian football, but for international football. So Indonesians watch the Premier League, La Liga, the Spanish League, the Italian League. How do we get them focusing on not just on the image level? How do we get them focusing? Can we use football as a source for Indonesians to take a proactive interest in Australia?
Yeah, definitely. Is it sort of playing games between, like teams here, so for example, in Western Australia and also Indonesia? Is it sort of, trying to bring players from Indonesia over here as well, and vice versa? So we've got one Australian player currently playing in Indonesia, Aaron Evans. He's playing for Persib Bandung. So for people who don't realise, Persib Bandung, the owner of the club is Jokowi's son. So Kaizang, and then the other owner is Eric Trohir, who's the Minister for State-Owned Enterprises. So it's a very, Indonesia, it is a very, very well watched game, very well sort of, looked after game as well. So it's, politics mix. It shouldn't be politics mixing sport, but it just happens. So
So if you had one thing, if I could give you one wish to how to kind of combine, and how to make Australian and Indonesian soccer work better, Australian Indonesian football, to tap into that great support system and great interest and passion in Indonesia, what is the one thing you would do?
I'd go a 3+1 Indonesian player for all A-League clubs, or a 3+1 ASEAN player, and encourage us to sort of help Indonesia achieve their footballing goals.
So to get players here.
Get players here, help development.
And that you think will draw then, not only that will draw the players, but it will draw the audience in.
Definitely. You know, if we play these games are one-off.
Yeah.
But having the players here week in, week out, you know, are we going to televise the games live back to Indonesia? Is it going to provide a bit of an opportunity for us to, you know, like sort of engage with that player, with the players, and understand the culture a lot better as well, and you know, just develop that relationship.
I think. And what's the response been by the football administrators here in Australia to that sort of idea?
Oh,
as much as you can say in a public forum.
Oh, how do you say it? It's, you know, we're working on it. I think with a new Football Australia CEO, James Johnson, he's worked at the AFC.
Yeah.
I think, you know, he understands the potential of Asia, but I think we're trying to sort of domestically, how do you say it, work on stuff here first, and then we're going to sort of look to Asia. But, you know, I'm seeing there's an appetite building here. We've got Football West director here, Annette. She's very passionate about Asia as well. And, you know, Football West are doing Asian engagement very well as well. So hopefully, you know, we're going to sort of, you know, fly the flag for Australia as well. So.
Great. I'll give you a break. I'll come back. I want you to think about business and how that should intersect with, because I know football in Indonesia is big business. So I'll come back to you with a question around that. So Chris, for you, I think this is a particularly poignant moment in you know, hockey relations. I think you've already alluded to Indian coaches coming here for the first time in big numbers, because for many years Indian hockey was wallowing, you know, from their great tradition in, you know, right up to the late 60s and even early 70s. I think they won a gold medal in 1980, but that was the boycotted Moscow Olympics. But so I think the resurgence of Indian hockey, I really believe that provides an opportunity for Australia-India relations to you know, to be a new part or a new part of Australia-India relations. It's taking place now. What are some other things we can think about doing? So in the Indian public, growing public of hockey fans, think about hockey, they think also about Australia.
Sure. I think hockey is definitely growing here as well. So I've aligned myself and done a bit of work with ISWA, the Indian Society of Western Australia. More around, so I've just built a business case out, which I've been developing with Hockey Western Australia, which is my role, I should mention, which is head of Asian engagement. So I'm sure that they might have some interesting discussions later. So I've actually built out a business case in around coaching programs, tours and tournaments. So we have some international tournaments, which I've organized for teams from Indonesia. We've got Malaysia, we've got Singapore, we're looking at Korea and Japan. So teams
Club
coming
teams.
We've got club and we've got national teams as well. So we've got under 16s national tournament, international tournament, and different region academies from across Australia as well. And then also, I've also ventured into the indoor side, which is a bit of a different format of hockey, but very well focused for Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore.
Is indoor hockey a big thing in India?
No, not so much in India. So that's why I've gone across a few different markets. But through Asia, it is quite big because it's a smaller side, 5-on-5, different unique sets of skills. And then there's a World Cup coming up, looks like in South Africa in the following year in 2023.
So when I guess when we look at sports diplomacy, you know, there's many aspects to it. There's the, you know, the competitions and the exposure and the media you get from the actual games. Yeah. But you know, from the links, you know, that you've had as a player and a coach, how much do you think those things can develop into more, I guess, long-term people-to-people links,
Yeah.
cultural links, even in government. I mean, with India, unfortunately or fortunately, the sports diplomacy is really naturally has revolved around cricket
Yep.
for many years, and we've seen the value of that, right? We've seen how Australian cricket players, generate so much fan attention in India. The sponsorship they get, whether it's playing, but also the endorsements, and is that something you think that can be replicated to a certain extent? I don't think hockey is ever going to be as big as cricket in India, but do you see that as an opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. Hockey for India, it's their home sport.
Yeah.
They feel like it's their national game. So you'll have a lot of people, and now coming into Commonwealth Games, you'll have a lot of people really follow it, and they get a huge amount of attention. Like we would have anywhere from 40 to 50,000 people come to the airport when you came home. So these are the sort of different numbers, again, you talk about and how they sort of follow you and follow on. I think the game, because of how well they've done, and the women, so the women for the first time made number 4 in the world for the Olympics.
And they beat Australia.
Beat Australia, yes. The girl that scored the goal, I trained her for about a year and a half.
So it's your fault.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, you got to do it on the day, like we all know, which is difficult. But I think the growth and what you're talking about, the cultural experience, like my friend here said, Robbie, effectively everything is based on relationships in Asia. So my connections into Japan is the head of Japan. The guy, one of the guys from Malaysia, who is the head of Malaysia, is one of the princes. So they're the people that you really got to connect with, the people that are making decisions, and create something that they're not going to get elsewhere. So I've just run a coaching conference. We've had over 100 coaches in and out from overseas, but also from Western Australia, and brought in different Olympic coaches, guys that have coached throughout Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, US. And so when they bring different experiences back, they can't get that anywhere else in the world. And lucky enough, here in Perth, we're effectively the home of hockey. So the AIS is based here at Curtin University, which I'm probably not allowed to say Curtin University here. But it's been there since the 1980s, and they're looking to further develop that as we go.
And I think I might be wrong here, but the growth coming out of success in India, I mean, winning that bronze medal, and the women doing well as well. I think instinctively, because of what you said about Perth being such a major hockey center in the world, and has been, if there's some creativity, by all stakeholders, yourselves as the hockey organization, but government, whether it be federal or state, and the awareness, whether it's tourism attraction for, as they come for competitions, and that hockey destination, as hockey becomes again more popular in India, I think there's quite a lot to be done there. Are you finding that you're getting enough support from the various levels of government, or do you think it needs to be done organically, or do you think there's a role for business and corporates to play more of a role?
I think there's definitely, you're going to always say there's a role there for corporates and businesses, because one of the programs I've sort of built is more of an elite businessman's trip, where they'll go and then experience India. So there's a Hockey World Cup in January 23, and they've just built a stadium which will hold more than 70,000 people, with hotels and all that type of stuff. And I think that the sports diplomacy of offering something that we don't get here, and then the flip side of bringing people out, I think there's great scope for the government, and we're looking into doing some more things with them, but also bringing them along on these adventures, or what I call them, but experiences, and then seeing what is actually done. So we're looking at some federal, we're looking at some state funding, and it's about really building out the program at the moment.
And what's the level of corporate funding for hockey in India?
depends on which sort of organization you're working through. So I've done some work with the Odisha government, which are the major sponsor for FIH. And then they've also got an academy which is run through with Tata Steel and Tata Trust, which also the round table we set out like this the other day. They said there's 980,000 employees part of Tata. So there's a bit of a difference in levels, and sports like JSW, which run Bangalore football club, are looking at doing more in that space as well. There's a vast range of obviously very experienced businesses in the market, but they're more looking after specific academies, which are business, so they can actually get a fair return on it.
Okay, I think why I'm focused on the business, because we've had seminars here that, and you know, in the Perth, USA Asia Center has had around the Australian government, notwithstanding our trade figures have gone up with India, you know, reasonably, you know, steady with Indonesia. There is a sentiment that there's not enough business to business involvement in both countries. I mean, you would have seen that in the in your role in the AIBC. Do you see an opportunity that, you know, for football to play a role in helping that business to business connection, especially given the amount of corporate money, I guess, in football in Indonesia?
Yeah, definitely. And sort of the trade relationship between Australia and Indonesia is underdone.
Yeah.
Hopefully with this news, either with the ISEPA that's been recently signed only a couple of years ago, that it's going to improve and increase. And I feel through sport or through football, there's an opportunity to help, you know, give that extra push, because I think sport being that soft diplomacy can build real relationships. And, you know, as we've been saying all along, it's all about the relationships when you're over there and spending time. And Indonesia is not an easy place to sort of probably do business in, but you need resilience, you need to be there, you need to be on the ground, you need to roll your sleeves up. And I think just, yeah, it takes time as well. And I found during my time in Indonesia, the longer I spent there, the better relationships I've developed, and the more I sort of respect I gained as well. So I think football has a big part to play in helping to build those relationships between Indonesia and Australia. And, you know, we're talking about the numbers, the figures that watching, you know, professional sport in sort of India and also Indonesia, the figures are crazy. Like, for example, one of the owners of, you know, a club in the Liga Satu has over 63 million followers on Instagram. You know, my roommate had 5.5 million followers on Twitter. So, you know, the numbers on social media are huge, and they're very young demographics. And what a great way to engage with the young people and sort of develop those long-lasting relationships.
And so, again, I'm thinking, you know, sort of a bit out of the box. So I like your idea of bringing, you know, players and getting the focus here. Do you see a role for elite Australian teams to be spending more time in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia more generally? Definitely.
Not just the elite, also the grassroots teams as well, spending time up there and bringing Indonesian teams here as well. You know, Football West brought a team in 2019, Persib Surabaya, the under-19s here. Then they travelled up to Surabaya as well. So those type of cultural exchanges are fantastic as well.
I mean, I guess often with these things, the organizational grunt is difficult. The money involved, you know, to get a fully stacked Socceroo team with all their European-based stars and all of that. It's not something easy to organize.
Definitely.
Also, you know, to have a game in, you know, Senayan Stadium.
They've got packed schedules currently right now. And Indonesian national team, they've got Asian Cup qualifiers, World Cup qualifiers. So, be able to organise games, it's quite difficult as well. But we just need to be creative. You know, I think we need it when we do things, we need to do them really well. And, you know, we as a sporting nation, I think we do the 1%ers really well. And so if we sort of, you know, like show our point of difference, is it our facilities? Is it our proximity, Western Australia to Indonesia? Is it the quality of our coaching, you know, our governance, our management, you know, like our sort of universities as well? I think because it's a very competitive market, the football and sporting, you know, sort of landscape, and we just need to sort of really get up there and I think spend a little bit of time there, understand what they need, and then work together with them. And I think we will be successful.
Sort of borrowing a little bit from from the India and the cricket, the way cricket and say rugby is organized with, say the annual, best of three, Bledisloe Cup type. We don't really mention Bledisloe Cup too much because we get beaten every time, but a kind of a, once in 2 year home and away series.
That'd be a dream for
Yeah,
me.
with a fully loaded Australian football team versus, and then that gives the continuity. You have a tradition of doing that. I mean, how I'm imagining it, but I'm imagining it is very difficult to do. But
it could even be an A-League All-Stars team against a Liga Satu All-Stars team.
That would be
could
easy.
Creative. Could it be like a West Australian state team against the East Java state team? Stuff like that. There's those potential opportunities there. And I've got to mention that you got the under-20 FIFA World Cup being hosted in Indonesia next year for the first time. So they'll be playing in a World Cup there. And then we've got the Women's World Cup next year. And, and there's such a great opportunity for us to work together to be able to sort of help grow the game and help each other and develop those people-to-people links along the way.
All right. And before I go to the audience, maybe one last question for you, Chris. So what, again, I'll ask a little bit that blue sky thinking question.
Sure.
If you had the opportunity to go there, if there's one thing you think that, let's say Hockey Australia, not just WA, could do to improve engagement all across Asia. I mean, India's this particular focus because Australia at this point in time is trying to consolidate its relationships with India, build it. But, across Asia, somebody gives you a blank check today, what would you do?
That's a very good question. I'd probably bring on a few more people to help me do what I'm doing. No, there is a lot of scope and there are a lot of feelings about the home hockey here in Western Australia. So a lot of people want to come. There's plans on fixing and improving and building a new stadium and bringing more teams in, because as Robbie said, the proximity, the opportunity, the coaching level, we've got some world-class master coaches here in WA.
So to make WA like a even more bigger center with the facilities, with the funding to bring coaches and
so
players
for hockey in Australia, we're number one in the world.
Yeah.
So for as long as I was, there's only one point we're number two in the world. So we're lucky enough to really sort of teach a lot of the world. We push Belgium to sort of follow the style of play in Holland, and we sort of up the level. So they're now be able to follow. There's a lot of respect for my group when I came through from the Asian countries, because out of I think it was prior to the Olympics, I lost one game in London Olympics, which is the semi-final. We played a game previously, Olympic games against Germany. We lost 2 games in about a year. Yeah. So you're talking out of 50 matches, you lose 2 games. One is semi-final. So there's a lot of respect from Asia, the way we go about doing our work, and the same would be for soccer. Discipline, finishing. We have such an array of way of doing things.
So to borrow from Robbie's idea, then, is there scope to integrate more, players from the region into our club and state competitions in Australia?
Yep.
And again, because it's such a well-respected league and infrastructure here.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there'll be elite, top level players in India, Malaysia, Singapore, Pakistan, Bangladesh that would love the opportunity to come and play a season here for one of the.
Definitely. So I had 3 Indian players coming that I'd coached Commonwealth Games and all that type of stuff. They then got pulled. So that was towards the end of their career. They were coming out. Unfortunately, they then got called back into the camp because there was a change of schedule between teams and so forth. There's too many tournaments for them to go to that they could actually be at. So we had some Indians, I had some Malaysians that were looking to come. There is a tournament which we hold called Rick Charlesworth Classic, funny enough, where we have a selection process. And what next year I've looked to do is bring out an Indian team to fulfill that. as well as some possible Malaysian team. So
Excellent.
there's some interest there. But we've had some Japanese players. We've had some Singapore just recently play as well. So there's a big push to be able to integrate them a lot. And like Robbie was saying, what made India so good was Hockey India League experience, because they then played with the best players in the world, and they then grew. So from that experience, they played Junior World Cup. They went on to win. So these players then have got a pension for the rest of their life from that. So they get looked after. So the understanding, playing with the best players from Germany, Australia, Spain, Holland, all coming in one place, having that experience really pushed up the level of India, and you can still see that with that group that's playing now.
Great. I'll open up to the floor. I don't know whether there's. I think so, there is a. Can I see the questions here? Any questions from the floor yet? Jim. I'll repeat the question. We don't have a roving mic tonight.
On a big diplomatic channels, obviously China, what sort of chances there probably don't play a lot of hockey?
Yeah, they do.
Really? Soccer. How could sport be more?
I'll repeat the question for the online audience and for the recording. The question from Jim was the question of China. How can we better use sports diplomacy, whether it's hockey or football or potentially other sports, to help our relations with China?
I think what's great with sport, it doesn't discriminate. You know, once you're on that field, once you're playing, we're all the same. We're all got that common goal, and have fun, enjoy yourselves, try and win, but afterwards you're friends. And I think, could it be like a bit of a two-way exchange as well, them coming down here and we going up there, and just sort of really getting to understand, China a lot better. And through football, we've got a lot of players that have actually played from here, from Australia, played in China. They've had fantastic times. Tim Cahill, Dino Djurbic, the Griffiths brothers, and they've already got fantastic things to say about with China. And maybe that's another, like a little bit of a bridge to help build the diplomatic relations between our two countries.
I know soccer obviously is very big. They put a lot of money into it,
Yeah.
so that there's a big opportunity, and it kind of has happened. It's about how do you again leverage that a bit more going forward.
How do we assist them to achieve their goals to qualify for a World Cup? They're really keen, and they've put a lot of money into their professional leagues, into the junior development as well. And is there an opportunity for us to use our expertise, up there as well, and vice versa?
Chris, Chinese hockey has come a long way. I mean, they put a lot of money in it.
They've put a lot of money in it. Their club competition is quite hefty. Like they play across all the states, and a lot of them don't like to leave China for hockey. But if you win the club competition individually, they get bonuses of upwards of $1 million per player. So it's quite a sport that they play. Currently, there's a lady called Alison Annan who played. I think she won 3 gold medals at the Olympics. She coached Holland to gold medals in the women, and she's currently there now as their head coach for China. And we've just got Rick Charlesworth, who's now become her assistant and a high performance director. So I think there's definitely some angles to be able to open up more around the whole business relations as well. But they do see our experience and looking at further development. What happens in China, they have Pro League, which is the top sort of 8 teams in the world, and they're a part of that. And what generally happens is the province that wins the competition then plays as China. So I would like to see how good they could actually be if they played as one country, as a whole national body. So I think it'd be very interesting to see how they'd come, because I think that they're a very disciplined race, and I played them when I was young, under 18s. We played against the Chinese women, and their coach was pulling them into place and telling them exactly what to do in their face, and we were all a bit shocked. But they went on to win a silver medal, so in 2000 Olympics. So they can be quite good. and discipline.
Excellent. Okay, there is a question online from Fiona Rothschild. It's a very sporting question. It is, yes, it is 10 years out, but what can Australia do in the next 12 months to prepare for the 2032 Brisbane Olympic Games?
You go first, this one.
Ladies first.
I guess it's a longer term thing, but what would you do if you say in your sport, if I can sort of interpret it, what would you do in the next 12 months to start that long journey so that we win golds in the men's and women's?
I would definitely say so. At the moment, there's a bit of an arm wrestle to where the national team will stay. So there's a bid going on, bid process, which WA is leading, which is always good. Brisbane have put in some good bids to be able to develop that, because obviously with 32 Olympics coming, they want to have that as their national centre. I think the understanding that is very similar, I suppose, to soccer. Hockey is you sort of have a 4-year cycle as a coach. So you'll go effectively post-Olympics, you'll have your sort of thin out period, and then depending on what you do with selection, generally we're talking 2 cycles. So that could be two different coaches in that window. The nice thing is Hockey Australia and Hockey WA have now been developing a younger group. So there's also already in the picture groups that have been developing for that further process. So we've got different state teams, we've got different academies, and then that further futures group, which is the Australian group, which will then be ready for that period of time.
Excellent. And in soccer, obviously, we've had some close calls when it comes to the Olympics. I think the men's took a 4th placing some years ago, and I think Tokyo we got 4th in the women's.
Yeah, we actually sort of qualified also for the men's for the first time in a while. And I think, we want to try and keep on qualifying for the Olympics. It's a fantastic tournament. They're almost like, precursors, training for when these players go and play in the World Cup. And the more tournament experience you can get, the better. And, looking at 2032, that's the 2009 born to 2013. So how are we putting programs in place for the kids so they will be able to be successful, both male and female? And I think with the amount of money now going to facilities here in Australia, at the home of the Matildas.
Because with football, it's the Olympics is under 23.
That's
right?
correct, yeah, under 23. So you usually go under 17 World Cup, under 20 World Cup, under 23s is the Olympics, and then you have the World Cup. So we're going to see hopefully a few of the players that were playing in the Olympics last year being able to play in the World Cup at the end of the year, so which is fantastic as well.
I think, this is very, very pertinent to what we do here in AIIA. I think next year, it hasn't dawned on a lot of people, but the hosting of the Women's World Cup next year in 2023, that will have the eyes of the world on Australia again, and through sports again, which is great.
And I'm hearing that it will be our largest event since the Sydney 2000 Olympics.
Yeah.
You're going to have they reckon around 50,000 Americans travel here for the tournament, and WA is hosting some games, which is fantastic as well. You've got the home of Matildas being built in Victoria. We've got the home of football here in Western Australia being built. So there's a fantastic opportunity. We've got a golden generation of the Matildas. Sam Kerr, the best player in the world, from WA, and which is fantastic as well. And yeah, it's sort of, it's fantastic. It's such a really exciting time for football in Australia.
I think that will have a real eye opener on sports diplomacy. As Australia, as we said at the beginning, does extremely well for its image by hosting these big international events.
And hope it increases, participation, with the female, with girls, and, and also from the boys' point of view as well. And we get more people playing, the game as well, and getting more, sort of eyes on Australia, being able to see the fantastic facilities and stadiums we have on offer, and maybe tourism and education and so on.
Yep, excellent. I think I won't be surprised if we do more sort of foreign policy, international relations discussions around that World Cup next year. Any more questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, fantastic question. And in an ideal world, hopefully it wouldn't be sort of any politics in sport, but yeah, can we use it for good? Can we sort of bring people together and just sort of be that bridge with respect to have that one sort of, like sort of love? Is it sport? Is it football? And yeah, bringing people together. And I just think, like through football or through hockey or through what other sports, there's an opportunity to do that soft diplomacy. So hopefully, we can through sport build, better relations. You develop that sort of through my experience. I lived in Indonesia. I didn't know much about Indonesia. Through football, I've been able to develop that cultural competency, been able to learn the language, that Indonesia literacy, and that takes time. And, through sport, I was able to do all that travel around Indonesia, get to understand the country, really sort of, develop a real passion for Indonesia. I call myself an Indonesianist right now as well. And how do you say it? And I never would have thought I would actually travel and play in Indonesia when I was younger. So yeah, so I think it's sort of changed me. So
And I think, in the Indian context, we've seen how, we've got a really live example of how cricket has been, I mean, not to say India and Australia has never had a fractious relationship. There were fractious moments, but cricket was always a safe space. Even during during periods, say when the Indian nuclear testing took place, about 20 years ago, conversations still took place, very, cricket provided an avenue for that. So, now that bandwidth should expand to hockey as well.
Yeah, I think it does. I think there's always some element of politics, especially where they fund specific things as well. Yeah, government, as soon as funding pools and so forth come through, there are sort of some form of elements. But I think there's always going to be politics no matter what sort of level. And I look at just the teams that we would have played through and depending on selection and all that I think there's always an angle of politics that we would run through. However, with sport, you do want to have those relationships which are open, the ability to compete and work together. And I've seen the ability, for example, Hockey India League, where you had Dutch, Spanish, Argentinians, Australians, and Indians from around India all playing together, trying to work together and build those relationships. So it's very light end, but
I think the idea that you had earlier around, if we have more Chinese players playing in the A League, that's a small step, right?
Yeah,
But it
definitely. It's
contributes.
almost like an olive branch.
Yeah. The challenge with being prescriptive though in sport is, you want the best players. Club wants, they want the best players, and I guess there's so much only policies can achieve for that kind of that participation, increasing that participation
And I understand
involvement.
coaches as well. It's pretty precarious, like we were talking about before, the amount of coaches, the turnover, and like it's a very precarious industry, and there's not many jobs available, professional jobs, and for them to probably take a chance on a player which probably doesn't have that experience. And it might be a little bit difficult, but we're just going to say, listen, give them some time. How about we make them a really sort of enjoyable experience, like make them feel at home, and just give them time, give them opportunity to sort of adapt, and they'll become, good players and be able to sort of be successful.
Excellent. Danny.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm really interested in the space that you're talking about, particularly in terms of grassroots connection. You said when you went to first play football in Indonesia, you hardly knew anything about it. Kids from way in soccer club went to Denmark. They fundraised, went to Denmark and played a tournament there. They raised 15,000 a kid or whatever and sent them over there rather than going local. West Australians go to Bali on mass every year. Schools do these programs for the kids in year 11 and 12 go over and build a toilet or build something somewhere. Like, for me, sport has this sort of capacity to connect people and to like you said, when you go into the field, we're all the same. It seems like it's such a natural space to build those early relationships that are not being built at the moment.
And I think we do grassroots football really well. We can do it better, but I think we do it really well. And
Can I just repeat the question?
So my question is, happening with that grassroots football in Australia, instead of going over to build the teams or whatever, go over and have a game of football, go over and play 4 clubs in a week and then come home rather than go over and build something that people might build themselves.
I guess the question from the audience here was the prospect for doing more grassroots connections between teams from players, whether at different age groups in Australia with our nearest neighbors, right?
I always go back to my first experience playing professionally or playing for the state team at the Lion City Cup, and playing against the likes of Philippines, Vietnam. We're in the same hotel eating together. You're playing, be having a bit of a laugh, and developing relationships there. And for the kids that got there, and it's not just about the football; it's about traveling around, looking, learning a little bit of the language, understanding the culture. Indonesians, how they're similar to us. They love their sport, they love their family, love their food, love their coffee, love to travel. So it's just a great opportunity for us to develop that a little bit more of a understanding of Indonesia. So I think like the media here don't help too much, and I think it's a great way for us to develop that sort of understanding of Indonesia. And then it's also a bit of a ripple effect. When they come home, had a fantastic time in Indonesia, played some fantastic games, developed some really good relationships, got to travel to Jakarta or Surabaya or Solo or Kalimantan and so on. So I think
So
it's a
in
great
terms,
opportunity.
to develop Danny's question, so in terms of, what is a career prospect? It's so hard to be a professional sports person, right? And given the level of support that football has in Indonesia, you were a bit of a pioneer, but can you see a pathway for more Australians to play and make a good living? I'm not sure, what is the recompense, say, playing in Indonesia or Malaysia or Singapore, but is that something attractive to an aspiring football player in Australia?
Definitely. So we're so lucky with football being global. So you can go play wherever. You can go play throughout Asia. Is it Africa? Is it Europe? Is it the Middle East? Is it North America, South America? And I always tell players, Indonesia's another option for you there as well. And I had a fantastic time there playing in front of big crowds. I was able to do what I love, travel close to home, great weather, and sort of, how do you say it? I never thought I'd end up in Indonesia, but I did, and had a fantastic time. We've seen a lot of players go up there and play right now before, after I was there. And it's just another option for the players. And some players are looking to Europe. I think, Europe might not be an option. Indonesia might be a better option for them as well, or Malaysia or Singapore, or is it China, and so on. So.
And do you think there is the openness for, say, young players when they're thinking? Obviously everyone wants to go play in the top leagues in Europe, but is it in the mindset, or do you just accidentally fall into it?
Well, definitely, I think it's probably on the players that have played there as well. It's a bit of our sort of job to educate the players as well. Like, okay, if you're not going to be able to make it in the A-League or in Europe, you have Indonesia, or, like you might play in the A-League, but you want a different experience. You want to go and play in front of big crowds. Do you want to sort of, develop, have a really good, sort of experience as well, and travel and, go to different places where you never thought you'd go, and, experience new cultures, new lifestyles, new foods, and develop new relationships. So there's always that opportunity. So
it's a bit different for hockey in India because the pipeline is there because of the IPL, and they're out there recruiting Australians, right? At any given time, there's, Australians will be being sought after to play in those teams.
I think for the last couple of years, they've actually put a pause on the IPL for hockey. It was just COVID and also organising different teams that are around funding and so forth, which is their plan is to bring it back now. But on the grassroots level, I'd say having now working with Hockey Western Australia, again, that academy program, really pushing that across every age group, and then into the school program, really building that. When I was in India, like I said, we traveled through different states and did all that. Hockey India, during COVID, we had online sessions sort of like this, and we developed a lot of coaches. So myself, the other head coach, and the women's coach was from Holland. We would do Zoom meetings and questions and assignments for 400 plus coaches at one time. So lucky I wasn't marking them. I handed that to someone else. But that was the sort of scope you're looking at. People would have to log in, and that would be then part of their job. So they were marked off individually to make sure that everything was done, and then assignments and so forth like that. But into Indonesia at present, I've worked with one of the guys who's the president of East Java, and we're looking to further develop that program into their schools, because there's not always a focus as of sport. Maybe I'm wrong. I've only been there once, but it's that further development to make sure that they then start that grassroots program and keep developing. I took personally from my own academy, Ciriello Coaching Academy, run for about 17 years with my father. We took 30 Australians from all over Australia to India, right in the perfect time of January 2020, just on COVID. So that was an interesting experience, and we went through Delhi and Agra, saw the Taj Mahal. They played and they got welcomed by a lot of different TV stations. We also then took them through orphanages. We took them through different zoos. They stayed at hotels with the teams. So we had Holland and India stay in the same hotel. So they stayed with them, met the players, ate, and had those experiences. And then to one of the schools, which I've been aligned with since about 2012, they have 27,000 kids at this one school. They feed them 3 times a day, and they're all tribal. They don't speak the same language, so they teach them songs and so forth to further develop. So I got to get them there, and they said, the guy that runs it is a friend now. He effectively said, we can only have the year 8s at the moment, which was 5,000 in the gym, of which they stood up and sung the national anthem for my group that came. And my tour was always about being challenged. So after they'd finished singing the national anthem, I asked who had sung before. And one girl said, yeah, I was in the choir. So I said, fantastic, here's a microphone. So she stood up, and all the parents wanted to get out of the way. So I pulled them all together, and they sung the national anthem of Australia to 5,000 year 8s plus 14 different TV channels. So that was a very interesting experience for them. But these are the sort of, I think at grassroots level that we're talking about in these heavily populated countries, but they're really welcoming, especially Australians.
Good, thanks. Wow, that's this is the kind of those kind of impactful life experiences. Hopefully then develops as well the long-term interest in relationships with the countries that they visit. We've had an online participant who cannot use has had problem using the Q&A function. So unless there's any other question from the floor, this will be the last question. It's a question to Robbie. It's a very specific one. You know it better than the sense of it better than I do. Is there an opportunity to discuss the possibility of Indonesian players playing in the NPLWA without it being included as one of the 2 visa players?
Oh, that would be like a dream for me to see an Indonesian player or Indonesian players playing in the NPL. I think it would sort of, like increase the awareness and maybe, increase, a bit of point of difference for the NPLWA. So maybe that's something we can sort of speak about later on. But how do you say it? I did have the opportunity to bring some Indian national team players to play in the NPL because it works perfectly. They finished their IPL Indian Super League season in March, and then they start again training in September. So it was the opportunity to come and play during their off season, just to play some extra games. That wasn't able to sort of come to fruition. That would have been fantastic, to have.
Will it come back on?
Yeah, hopefully, because they play for that 6 months, and they've got 6 months where they're not sort of playing games. So for them to be able to come here and it works out perfectly with WA. But to have an Indonesian player or players playing here in WA would be fantastic. And I think it'd be fantastic because the games will be televised. Hopefully, well, back into Indonesia. Opportunity for sponsors, for people to just really sort of understand Indonesia and sort of increase the awareness of our NPL competition.
Great. I'm assuming there are no final questions. We've come to our end. As it is tradition, we have a gift for you. But before we do that, I just wanted to make some final remarks, which is, I guess this is an unusual topic for an AIIA WA event, especially with sporting, people who have played professional sport in countries where we are trying to develop these relationships, non-traditional sports. When I say, outside of cricket, rugby, and the sports that Australians are really famous for in I guess in the developed countries. So I think what you've shown us is, from your own personal experience, is that sports that can play a foundation to help Australia and Australians build relations in our nearest neighborhood. What I hear is things are happening that probably haven't happened before, but a lot more can be done. I think both of you are contributing your experience in that quest, in that journey. So I wish you all the best, and we'd love to have you back here down the road and give us an update in 3 or 4 years' time, and things have developed, and you've been able to contribute even more. So Molly, our secretary, has got a small token of our appreciation. And thank you. I'll close the recording now, and thank you to all our online viewers, and I apologize again for the technical problems earlier on. Thank you very much.